Old Roy Disney said, it is not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. Roy Disney was Walt Disney's brother, and I think he's a pretty wise man when he made that statement. That's so true. If we know what we value, it's really easy to make decisions. This week, we've been talking about building a personal operating system, and I hope today you will lock in for this conversation, because I think our values really are one of the things that give us the ability to make the right decisions. They really do drive and shape our behaviors, if you want to think of it that way. Welcome to Winning Begins at Home. Let's start with a question today. We've done that the last couple of days, but today is about our principles, really the things that are the non-negotiables in our life. So what principles today are so important to you that you would be willing to make sacrifices to honor those principles? When we begin to think this way and behave this way and make changes this way and say no to things because of our values and say yes to things because of our values, it's actually going to be a differentiator between us and people who really don't have a rudder to their ship. It's so, I mean, can you imagine being on the ocean? And by the way, the rudder is not real big, but it's amazing what happens if the rudder is not on the boat and it's just out on the sea and the wind starts blowing. It just kind of goes whichever way the wind blows. And yet, how many people do we see their lives? This is what happens. And so I want to ask you today, or do you feel aimless? I mean, you just sort of feel like you're drifting. You're not heading in the direction to your vision, like we talked about a couple of days ago. Like, where are we going 10 years from now? I want this to be true. These 5 things. Here's 2 or 3 things I'm gonna have to do on each one of them. That's our mission, right? And then yesterday we talked about our purpose, why we're here. And yet, how many of us we get off track? We're just not really locked in on that. So today, I want us to think through this. It's really powerful mindset to say that I'm going to have some non-negotiables that are going to help me decide, again, what to say yes to, what to say no to. So there's a research consulting firm called Bain and Company. You've probably heard of Bain, very famous consultants, and they found that executives, and again, we don't talk at work here very much, but they do a lot of executive study, and they found that executives who could clearly articulate their personal values were 70% more likely to make decisions that they felt confident about. They had integrity with. Obviously, there's just congruence there when we think about it that way. But most people, when asked about their values, they would list qualities that they admire and rather than principles that they're willing, to lay down for. I mean, to lay down their life for. I mean, I say it that way. We're probably not having to die for our values, but are you willing to sacrifice for them? I mean, I think it's amazing when I think about it. I read a story last week. This guy was talking about this business deal that went down, and this was decades ago. A piece of a company was sold for like $54 million to this one guy bought 40% stake in a company for $54 million. And then, it was a handshake deal. The calendar starts moving, legal people get involved. They're trying to get this deal closed and everything. Well, 6 months go by, and it's in the construction industry, and the price of steel changed to the degree that $54 million price tag actually now was valued at about $180 million. And so this guy pays 54 for it, and now all of a sudden his equity in it is $180 million because of the value of the company went up so much in 6 months. And so the guy who was doing the purchasing called the guy who owned the company originally and said, "Hey, I feel bad about it. We said 54 million, but I obviously the deal has changed here. So I want to make sure I do the right thing. What if I pay you half of the equity that I've gained? I don't even own it yet, but rather than you having to, lose all that money, what if I paid you half of it?" And the guy who was the original owner, I love this. He said, "I shook hands on 54 million. I'm going to honor my word because that's more important to me than any money that you might give me here for these shares." And so how amazing it. That's what I'm talking about there. You've got a value and you say, no matter what, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. That's what integrity looks like when we have this holistic mindset. Our values are are something that we're true to, our principles that we want to live by, if you want to say it that way. And I think there's a difference between aspiring to something and really valuing it. It's one thing to say I'm going to be this way, but when push comes to shove, am I really going to do what I say I'm going to do? I think it's amazing for when we see that happen. And I've been so impacted by people who have lived that way, and they do what they say they're going to do. It's pretty incredible. Now, how would we begin to discover what our values are? Because today I want us to think through what are your values. That's where we'll land here today. But I want you to begin to think about um, your values by maybe examining your behavior, not just your intentions, but like, what do you really do? What you do is an indicator of what you really do value. Now, if you don't value, I mean, if you want your values to be different than they are, like you don't think your behavior matches what you aspire to, then maybe we need to change our behavior. Maybe we need to change what we're identifying as our value. And today, this is the opportunity for us to redo our values, to reshape our values, and think about it. Most of the time, we get values, and they begin to we have some conflict there because we say something and then we do something different. And that is like there's nothing worse than lying down at night and knowing that you're not really being true to what you say. And so if you need to make a little shift there, I would encourage you to do that. Years ago, that happened to me. I was in my early 20s, and there were just some places in my life where I said something and I didn't really behave the way I said I wanted to behave. And I actually ran across this old Bible verse. It said, "The man who covers his sin will not prosper, but the one who renounces will find mercy." And I just was, it's value proposition, right? I was like, if you're gonna, you're gonna try to hide things, and you're gonna act one way and say one thing and be something else, like that's not gonna work, and you're not going to prosper. And I'm not even talking about prospering financially here. I'm talking about you lie down at night again and you go, I'm miserable because I know I'm not being true. It's a lack of integrity is what I had at that time. And so, but the cool thing is, with this conversation, especially that Bible verse, it's like, if you renounce it, if you turn and you change the way you're thinking about it, you actually, you get mercy. I mean, I love that God has so much mercy for us and he forgives us. And, I can honestly say he literally, I mean, there was this intersection of that verse and my behavior. And when that happened, I was like, I don't know a lot, but I know I'm not going to live this way. I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can, to live a life that is true to my values. And so I redid my values. And so you may be listening today and you're going, I need to do that. I've never really done that. I've just tried to cover things up. I've taken shortcuts of all that. I'm just telling you, there's nothing better than knowing that you have values and you're willing to sacrifice those values, and it will cost you something. There are times it's going to cost you. It'll cost you financially. It'll cost you emotionally. It'll cost you. I mean, it's gonna. But I think the price is way higher to living a duplicitous life. I really do. I don't. That's just miserable. I don't want any of that. And so, so today, what do we do? Let's think about this. So how would we narrow down our values to what we would call our core values? So when I think about my core, I think about, well, I say my core. I probably need to do a little work on this, but I think about a person. Let's just use somebody out there who you got a great set of abs. We all have them. We don't know it, but we all have abs, right? And there's actually, we always say the 6-pack, but I think there's an 8-pack. There's more. There's actually, you've got a pack, right? That's what we always think. I got a pack. It's just not. It's just not distinguishable like it needs to be. And so I think the core element of our values is like, it's the health of our behavior. Just like your core of your body, your gut, all that stuff, that is the health of your body. If your core is not healthy, you may be overweight, you may be sick. I mean, you got things going on if you don't take care of that core part of your body, the things that you put into your body, all that stuff. It's really important. And I think our core values, that's really the way I want to think about it. The health of our life is wrapped up in those values. So what would be we won't even go 6 here. What would be the 3 to 5 values that you say, no matter what, this, and this, they're going to be true. I'm going to behave this way. It's going to drive the way that I do things. And I think if we can identify those core values that actually guide our decisions, it's amazing what can happen. And so if you've never really done that exercise, I encourage you to do that. And you may say, well, I have 10 things that I value. That's great. But I would say it's probably easier to think about it from a core value standpoint. It's not that you can't have these secondary values that you're going to eat, and they'll drive your behavior. That's for sure. But I think this idea of having 3 to 5 things that you just say, this is what I'm going to be known for, people are going to be able to count on. It's incredible what happens when we do that. So if you've not done that, I want to encourage you to make your list of values, and then make your values actionable. Well, let's not just these abstract, I want to be an honest person. Well, okay, what does that mean? Or I want to be a generous person. Well, what are you going to give? Or what are you going to share? I think identifying some actionable ways that I can live out this. And I'll give you a story. Years ago, I was coaching an executive, and we were working on a blueprint for him. He was actually doing what we call a life plan, and we were spending a couple of days together. And he was identifying several things that we do in that blueprint, which was just pretty fascinating to listen to. And this guy, he's very successful, got a multi-million-dollar business, and he's done great. And I asked him, I was asking him the birthday party question, like, what, when you get to 80, and this guy's he's probably 40 at the time. I said, when you get to 80, what do you want people to be able to say at your birthday party? There are going to be people gathered that day. Your spouse will be there. Your kids probably show up. You maybe have some grandkids, people that you hired at work and worked with, and associates and companies and vendors and all kinds of people. I mean, you're going to have a bunch of people there, and your mom and dad may be gone at that point, but if they could come back, like, what, all the people you care about the most, what would you want them to be able to say? And he identified as his North Star. He said, I want to be known. I'd love for people to be able to say, that's the most generous man I ever knew in my life. And that's just great. What a value to have, a value of generosity. But here's what I told him. I said, if you're going to get to 80 and people are going to say you're the most generous man they've ever known, you got to be generous every single day in every single encounter. I mean, that's what a generous man would do. He would have a not just a aspiration for generosity, but he would have action that's generous. And so that's what I'm talking about. If you can identify 3 to 5 values, say, this is what I want people to be able to say, and here's what I'm going to need to do if they're going to be able to say it, I think you're on your way. So I don't think your values are what you put on TikTok or what you put on Instagram. I think your values are what are imprinted on your mind and heart. They're going to drive your behaviors. And I love this idea. If I'm going to have an operating system for my life, I got to have a vision, got to have a mission, purpose, all that stuff we've been talking about all week. But what are my values? What are those 3 to 5 non-negotiables? They're going to help me make decisions, help me know what to say yes to, help me what to say no to, they're going to drive my behavior the way we said it. So I hope you'll identify yours today and come back tomorrow. We're going to talk about aligning all this stuff we talked about this week. How do we align all that with really how we use our time as we start into the next week? So come back and join us for that. We'll continue this conversation. I hope that notebook's growing here. You're beginning to fill that out, and you're really giving some thought to the kind of person that you want to be. All right. I hope you'll share with somebody. Come back again tomorrow. Love you guys. And I hope you'll never forget that winning begins at home.